I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague Candice to talk about creating a culture of co-exploration.
Thanks so much, Dana. So now that we've covered considering your audience when planning your presentation, we're going to turn to talking about how to create what we are calling a culture of co-exploration when you're actually giving the research presentation. This strategy could be useful when you have participants physically in front of you, perhaps during a meeting or a conference. In the next section, we're going to consider how to invite participants into making meaning of what they're hearing as opposed to just being passive listeners. So there are many ways that researchers can engage practitioners in research. Goodman and Thompson wrote an overview of different forms of practitioner or stakeholder involvement, and they described these three basic levels. At the lowest level of involvement, researchers can do outreach and education and make an effort to send information to the stakeholders to help them learn more about a study. At the middle level, there is coordination. This is when the researcher invites stakeholders to give feedback on research and to weigh in about the implications. This is the level we're going to be spending the most time discussing in this section. At the highest level of involvement, there is something called cooperation. This is when researchers and practitioners really work together to determine research questions and make decisions about data analysis and interpretation. This kind of research is highly participatory and collaborative. This is beyond the scope of what we'll be covering here today, but it's important to know that many researchers take this stance. It's also important to note that these categories are not mutually exclusive. So researchers might partner differently with stakeholders at different points in the research process. For example, you might have a lot of stakeholder involvement when you determine your research questions, but then maybe less involvement as you begin the data analysis section. So what is a culture of co-exploration? This is what we are calling when both researchers and the audience are invited to discuss, question, and explore the findings and implications of research. This is done after the research has been completed, and you really want to begin discussing it with your audience. This is really different from how researchers typically present work. Usually the culture of formal presentations positions the researcher as an expert, sharing what they know, and the audience's only role is to listen. In a culture of co-exploration, the audience is invited to join in the act of asking questions and making sense of what they are hearing. The researcher is able to take an inquiry stance about his or her study and position him or herself as a learner together with the audience. This might involve a few elements, such as establishing shared goals for the purposes of reviewing the research, encouraging the audience to ask questions, and inviting discussion about the research findings and implications. So for example, throughout this webinar, we've been gathering some of your input by asking you questions to solicit your expertise about how you have done this before. To set a tone of inquiry and collaboration during the presentation, you might use what we call discussion protocols, which are structured discussion activities, to help participants talk about what they are hearing in the research presentation or to generate implications. Some examples that we've used are the Think, Pair, Share discussion protocol, which is useful for a quick discussion. You basically have people think for a moment about their response, talk to a neighbor, and then you could ask them to share out with the group. Or a gallery walk, which is more useful for a larger group of people. If you have lots of data displays or artifacts that you want them to look at, they walk around and look at them in the room just like they were looking at an art gallery. A detailed handout with some of these suggested discussion protocols and ideas is in your workshop materials on page 13.